He is a man of power, wealth, and icy control. A CEO known for shutting everyone out, never letting love touch his heart. He once vowed never to trust a woman, never to believe in love again. But fate doesn't always respect promises. Sometimes it sends the most unexpected person, a girl with nothing, abandoned and broken, to change everything. In this video, you'll discover how a ruthless CEO's cold world was shaken by one fragile soul. Stay until the end, because what happens next will challenge everything you thought you knew about love, loyalty, and destiny. Before we talk about the man who ruled the business world with ice in his veins, let us first step into the world of the girl who would one day melt his hair. Her story is not one of riches or privilege, but of loss, loneliness, and the quiet strength only pain can create. She was not born into wealth, nor was she raised in comfort. Instead, she carried the weight of abandonment from the very beginning, a burden no child should ever know. From the moment she opened her eyes to life, the world seemed determined to remind her that she was unwanted. Her family, broken by circumstances and perhaps by cruelty, turned their backs on her. It wasn't a single event, but a series of small betrayals, the kind that eat away at a soul over time. She would sit alone at night, listening to the laughter of families nearby, wondering why her own had left her behind. The echo of absence was louder than any words of love she might have once heard. Yet, even in the silence of rejection, something remarkable happened. She did not grow bitter. She did not harden her heart. Instead, she held on to the warmth of her own spirit, guarding it as though it were the last treasure she had. Pain became her teacher, but kindness remained her choice. She learned to survive without a home that embraced her. She worked small jobs, sometimes sweeping, sometimes cleaning, often unnoticed by those around her. Strangers passed her by as if she were invisible, and yet she still found a way to smile. Her smile was not born from joy, but from courage, the courage to face each new day without surrender. Life continued to test her, pushing her into corners where despair could easily take over. When she was hungry, she learned the taste of sacrifice. When she was lonely, she whispered prayers into the night, hoping someone, somewhere, was listening. And when the world seemed coldest, she found warmth in the smallest things. A kind word from a passerby, a child's laughter in the street, or even the gentle light of morning breaking through the window of the place she called shelter. Many people in her position would have given up, becoming hardened, cruel, or angry at the world. But she was different. Despite being abandoned, she could not bring herself to abandon kindness. Despite being forgotten, she refused to forget compassion. She carried with her an innocence that life had tried to crush but failed to destroy. It was this resilience, this quiet purity that made her extraordinary. She was not powerful, not wealthy, not someone the world would notice. And yet her spirit shone brighter than many who had everything. She lived each day knowing that love was something she might never truly have, but she continued to believe in it anyway. For her, love was not about what she received. It was about what she gave. She was the kind of girl who would share her last piece of bread with a hungry child, the kind who would offer a hand to someone struggling, even when her own strength was fading, the kind who carried the scars of rejection, but wore them like quiet badges of honor. Because every time life tried to take away her light, she chose to shine even brighter. Before long, the streets, the corners, the people who overlooked her began to realize something about her presence. Even in her poverty, even in her loneliness, she brought with her a sense of calm, a reminder that kindness does not need wealth to exist. Her very existence was a contradiction, abandoned by those who should have loved her most, yet filled with more love than many could ever understand. And still, life did not make things easy for her. She faced betrayal from people she trusted, humiliation from those who thought themselves better, and endless days of uncertainty. But each trial became a stepping stone. Each wound became a lesson. She began to understand that the world could break her body, but it could not steal her soul. There were nights she cried herself to sleep, quietly so no one would hear. There were mornings she woke up with nothing but the strength of hope to carry her forward. And yet, she kept going. She kept walking, even when the path was unclear. Her heart remained untouched by bitterness. Instead of asking, "Why me?" she asked, "How can I still be kind?" Instead of drowning in sorrow, she taught herself to rise above it. Her life was not one of luxury, but of courage. Not one of comfort, but of survival. And though the world might not see it, she was building something inside herself that money could never buy. A spirit unbreakable, a warmth undeniable. This was the girl the world abandoned, and yet she never abandoned the world. She gave back in small ways, through her gestures, her patience, her willingness to forgive. And even though she carried her wounds in silence, her kindness spoke louder than her pain. What she didn't know was that this same kindness, this same inner fire, would one day collide with a man whose heart had turned to stone. A man who believed love was a weakness. A man who had everything in the world, except the warmth she carried in her soul. Her story, filled with pain yet marked by resilience, was preparing her for something greater. Every tear she shed was shaping her strength. Every rejection she endured was carving out space for a love unlike any other. For though she lived as though forgotten, destiny had not forgotten her. And when the time came, when her path crossed with his, the world would finally see why the girl abandoned by family, scarred by loneliness, and tested by hardship was the only one who could. Before we talk about the man's icy resistance, we must first understand how fate pulled two worlds together that were never meant to meet. His world was one of power, glass towers, and ruthless decisions. Her world was built from scraps, silence, and survival. And yet circumstances, as if written by an unseen hand, forced their paths to cross. It did not happen by choice. He would never have welcomed her into his carefully guarded empire. To him, emotions were distractions. Kindness was weakness, and trust was a word long erased from his vocabulary. But the world does not bend to a single man's rules, not even his. And one day, in a twist of events beyond his control, she was brought into his life. She entered quietly, without wealth, without connections, without the armor most carried in his world. She was simply herself, a poor girl who had endured too much yet carried herself with quiet dignity. To his eyes, she was insignificant, another shadow among millions. But fate is never loud when it begins its work. It starts softly, unnoticed, and only later reveals its power. From the moment she stepped into his presence, he resisted. His gaze was sharp, his voice cold, his manner ruthless. He made no attempt to hide his disdain. She, to him, was a reminder of everything he had sworn to avoid: vulnerability, trust, the risk of being hurt again. So he kept his distance, drawing invisible lines around himself, daring her to cross them. But the girl, abandoned though she was, had faced far harsher rejections. His cruelty was sharp, yes, but it was not unfamiliar. She had known harsher words, colder silences, deeper betrayals. What made her different was how she responded. Instead of shrinking away, she met his cruelty with patience. Instead of answering his sharpness with bitterness, she offered quiet understanding. This unsettled him more than anger ever could. Anger he knew how to fight. Tears he knew how to ignore. But kindness from someone who had no reason to give it, that was something he could not explain. Day after day, their paths intertwined. He barked orders, and she obeyed without complaint. He created distance, but somehow she always found her way past it, not with force, but with presence. She never tried to break his walls. She simply existed in a way that made the walls seem less necessary. At first, he thought it was an act, a mask she wore to hide her true intentions. In his world, everyone wanted something: money, status, power. Surely she was no different. Yet, as time passed, he could not find the hidden motive. She wanted nothing from him. Not his wealth, not his protection, not even his acknowledgement. All she gave was what she had always given: quiet strength, patience, and a warmth that seeped into places he thought long frozen. Her strength was not loud. It was not the kind that demanded attention. It was the quiet strength of someone who had endured life's storms and still managed to stand. She had been broken, yes, but she refused to let her brokenness define her. And, slowly, though he fought against it with every ounce of will, he began to notice. He noticed the way she carried herself, with dignity that poverty could not erase. He noticed the way she treated others, with kindness even when it was not returned. He noticed the way she seemed unshaken by his cruelty, as though his sharp words were pebbles against the mountain of pain she had already endured. This noticing unsettled him. He had built his life around the idea that no one could reach him, that his heart was locked away forever. And yet, here was someone with nothing, no wealth, no power, no influence, quietly beginning to unlock doors he thought he had sealed shut. The change did not happen suddenly. It was not a lightning strike, but a slow erosion. Day after day, her presence chipped away at his walls. He told himself it was nothing. He told himself he was still in control. But deep inside, something was shifting. One evening, when the weight of his empire bore heavily on him, he caught himself thinking of her. Not her struggles, not her poverty, but the way she smiled even when the world gave her no reason to. That smile lingered in his mind longer than he wanted to admit. And for the first time in years, he wondered what it would be like to believe in warmth again. Her influence grew not because she tried to change him, but because she refused to let the world change her. He had expected her to bend under his ruthlessness, to break under the pressure of his coldness. But she did neither. She simply remained herself, a constant reminder that kindness was not weakness, and love, though painful, was not impossible. In meetings he found his thoughts wandering. In silence he found himself listening for her presence. And though he still resisted, though he still told himself he was above such emotions, the cracks in his armor were beginning to show. Before we talk about how those cracks would one day shatter, we must stay in this moment, the moment when a cold, ruthless CEO, who once swore never to let love touch him again, first began to feel the faintest warmth of a girl who had nothing but her heart to give. Melt the heart of the cold CEO. Before we talk about the man he would become, we must pause and look closely at the cracks that had begun to form in his walls. For years, he lived by rules he carved into stone. Never trust, never feel, never love. These beliefs were his armor, the shield that kept him safe from betrayal and disappointment. But now, in the quiet moments when no one was watching, he found himself questioning everything he once thought was unshakable. It began with small observations. At first, he noticed her presence only in passing, the way she carried herself, the way she moved through life with quiet determination. But soon, he began to see more. He noticed the shadows in her eyes, the pain she tried to hide behind her soft smile. He noticed the scars left not on her skin, but on her spirit, the kind of scars only a life of abandonment could leave. And strangely, instead of pushing him away, those scars drew him closer. She was fragile, yes, but not weak. Her courage was not loud or demanding, but steady, unyielding. She faced each day with nothing to her name, yet she stood taller than many who had everything. He had once believed strength came from power, wealth, and control. But watching her, he began to realize there was another kind of strength, the kind that came from surviving without bitterness, from choosing kindness even when the world gave none in return. This realization unsettled him. It shook the foundation of the beliefs he had lived by. If strength could exist in her, a girl abandoned by everyone, then what did that say about him? A man with the world at his feet, yet emptiness in his heart. The more he watched her, the more questions filled his mind. Why did she still care for others when no one had cared for her? Why did she still smile when life had given her every reason not to? Why did her presence make the silence in his office feel less heavy, the long nights less lonely? He had no answers, only feelings he had long forgotten how to name. At first, he tried to fight it. He reminded himself of his vow, of the pain he once endured that led him to close his heart. But the more he resisted, the stronger the pull became. Every time he looked at her, every time he heard her voice, every time he caught a glimpse of her quiet courage, something inside him shifted. One evening, as he sat in his office surrounded by endless paperwork, he heard her laughter echo faintly from another room. It was not a loud laugh, not the polished kind of laughter he often heard at social gatherings. It was genuine, soft, unguarded, and in that moment he realized how long it had been since he had heard something so pure. He closed his eyes, and for a brief second, the weight on his shoulders felt lighter. Before long, his thoughts began to wander in ways he could not control. He wondered about her past, about the family that had abandoned her. He wondered how much she had suffered, how many nights she had cried herself to sleep, and yet still managed to rise again. He wondered what gave her the strength to keep going when so many others would have given up. And with each thought, the ice around his heart melted a little more. For the first time in years, he felt something real, something he could not explain with logic or dismiss with pride. It was not pity. He had felt pity before and brushed it aside easily. This was different. This was admiration, respect, and something deeper, something far more dangerous. Love. At first, he denied it. Love, to him, was a weakness. Love made men vulnerable. Love was the very thing he had sworn to avoid. But no matter how much he tried to bury the feeling, it kept rising. He would catch himself, watching her longer than he should. He would find excuses to be near her, to hear her voice, to see her smile. He told himself it was curiosity, but deep down, he knew it was more. Her courage fascinated him. She had nothing, yet she carried herself with dignity. She was alone, yet she walked as though she had the strength of 1,000 hearts. And the more he saw her, the more he realized how empty his own world had been. He had built an empire of steel and glass, but it was she who showed him what true strength looked like. Before we talk about how love would eventually transform his entire life, we must remain in this moment. The moment of awakening, when a man who had sworn never to feel again found himself questioning his very beliefs. He began to see love not as a weakness, but as the only thing that could make him truly human. Before we talk about the choice he was forced to make, we must first see how fragile the world they built together really was. Love had begun to bloom between them, quietly, almost secretly, in stolen moments of understanding and unspoken connection. But love, especially a love born between two people from such different worlds, never survives without a fight, and sooner or later the world noticed. At first, it was whispers. A CEO of his power and reputation seen near a girl with nothing, a girl who had no wealth, no background, no influence. People questioned her intentions as though kindness could only be a mask. They questioned his judgment as though love could only be weakness. The more time they spent together, the louder the whispers grew, until whispers turned into rumors, and rumors into threats. Society did not accept her. To them, she was a stain on his image, a shadow that did not belong beside the gleam of his empire. Business partners warned him. Investors doubted him. Even those closest to him, the few he still allowed near, advised him to let her go. "She will ruin you," they said. "She is not worthy of you." But their judgment was nothing compared to the rejection she faced. Families that once ignored her now remembered her, only to scorn her. Strangers mocked her, jealous of the attention she received. And through it all, she remained silent, carrying the weight of their cruelty the same way she had carried the weight of her own family's abandonment. She did not complain, she did not break, but the pain in her eyes was something he could no longer ignore. For the first time, the CEO felt powerless. He could command an empire, move markets, and bend men to his will. But he could not silence the world's cruelty. And worse, he could not silence his own fear. Deep inside, the voice of his past returned. The voice that once told him love was dangerous, that trusting someone would only end in betrayal. That voice grew louder with every obstacle they faced. He found himself torn between two lives. One was safe, cold, and familiar. The life of solitude, where no one could hurt him because no one could ever reach him. The other was uncertain, fragile, and terrifying. A life with her, where every day was a risk, but also a chance at something real. The challenge came to its peak when a scandal broke. An attack designed to destroy not only her, but him as well. Headlines twisted her story, painting her as a gold digger, an opportunist, a nobody trying to climb into a world where she didn't belong. His rivals smiled behind closed doors, certain that the great CEO would finally crumble under the weight of love. The board of his company gave him an ultimatum. If he wished to protect his empire, his reputation, his wealth, he had to cut ties with her. If he didn't, he risked losing everything he had built. And there it was. The turning point, the line drawn clearly before him. Stay cold and alone, guarding the empire he had built brick by brick, or fight for the girl who had given him warmth when he had nothing left inside. Before we talk about the choice he made, we must linger in that moment of silence, when a man who had once sworn never to love again stood on the edge of everything he had built. In front of him was the life he always thought he wanted, and beside him was the girl he never thought he needed. The world demanded he let her go. His fears begged him to step back, but his heart, for the first time in years, told him to fight. Before we talk about the decision he made, we must step into the storm that surrounded him. For so long, he had lived a life untouched by emotion, a life ruled by logic, control, and unshakable distance. But now, the walls he had built around his heart were under attack, not from enemies, not from rivals, but from the very love he had tried to deny. The whispers had grown into roars. Everywhere he turned there were voices, business partners warning him, board members doubting him, the media questioning him. The world demanded explanations. How could a man of such wealth and power, a CEO with everything at his command, lower himself to stand beside a girl with nothing? To them it was scandal, weakness, even betrayal of the empire he had built. And she, the girl who had once been invisible to the world, now stood in the center of its cruel spotlight. Mocked, insulted, torn apart by strangers who did not know her story. Every step she took was shadowed by ridicule. Every word she spoke was twisted. Yet, through it all, she carried herself with quiet. Grace, the same grace that had first caught his attention. She did not fight back with anger, nor did she run away in fear. She endured, just as she always had, with a strength that both humbled and unsettled him. But he saw the pain behind her silence. The long nights where her eyes grew tired from tears she would never admit. The way her hands trembled when she thought no one was watching. She had carried abandonment all her life, but now she was carrying his world too, a weight no one should bear alone. Inside him, the battle raged. He was torn between two choices. One was safe. Return to the life he knew, cut her off, and prove to the world that he was still untouchable, unshakable, the cold CEO who could never be broken by love. The other was terrifying. To stand by her side, to fight against the storm, to risk everything he had built, reputation, empire, even legacy, for the girl the world called unworthy. His fears screamed at him. They reminded him of the wounds of his past, the betrayal that had turned him cold in the first place. They told him love would destroy him, that she would leave him broken just as others had before. But his heart whispered differently. It reminded him of her courage, her kindness, her ability to survive a world that had already rejected her. The breaking point came when his company's board delivered an ultimatum. If he wished to remain their leader, if he wanted to preserve the empire he had built with his own 2 hands, he had to let her go. Publicly, clearly, without hesitation. To them, she was nothing but a risk, a scandal, a weakness they could not afford. For the first time in his life, he was not facing a business decision. He was facing a decision of the heart. In front of him stood the 2 worlds he had tried to keep apart. On one side was everything he thought defined him: power, wealth, status, control. On the other was the girl who had given him something he never thought he would feel again: love, raw and real, fragile yet unbreakable. He stood in silence, torn apart by the weight of the choice. To walk away from her would mean safety, respect, and power. To stay with her would mean risk, ridicule, and perhaps ruin. Yet deep down, he knew safety had never truly given him peace. Power had never truly given him happiness. All the control in the world had never erased the emptiness inside him. Before we talk about what came next, we must stay in this moment. The turning point, where a man who had once sworn never to love again was forced to choose between the empire he built with his hands and the girl who had rebuilt his heart with nothing but her warmth. And so his cold heart finally learned what power and wealth never could: that sometimes the one who has nothing can give the greatest gift of all: love. She had no fortune, no family, no status to offer, yet she gave him warmth, courage, and a reason to live beyond his empire. Now I ask you, would you believe in love if it happened to you? If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more stories like this.